Her billionaire mother-in-law wouldn't let them sleep in the same room until she learns the chilling truth. The first night after the wedding, the mansion felt like a museum, silent, cold, and echoing with secrets. Tiana brushed her fingers over the white silk sheets in what was supposed to be their bedroom. The air smelled like roses and new money, too clean, too perfect, and yet something about it felt wrong. She turned toward her husband. "Ethan," she whispered, forcing a smile, "we're really here. Married. Finally." Ethan smiled faintly, but his eyes flickered toward the hallway. "Yeah, finally," he said, almost like the word hurt to say. Then the sound came, sharp, distant, the echo of a woman's voice down the hall. "Ethan." It was his mother. Tiana's chest tightened. She'd only known Mrs. Sterling for a few weeks, but already, she understood how power could live in someone's tone. Even when the woman spoke softly, her words carried command. Billionaires didn't need to shout. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "She probably needs something," he muttered. "It's almost midnight," Tiana said, half whispering, half pleading. "Can't it wait till morning?" He hesitated. "She's been having those dreams again. About my dad." Her smile faded. She'd heard the story, how Margaret Sterling, one of the richest women in New York, had survived years of brutal abuse from her husband before finally fighting back. It was dark, tragic, and yet, that had been decades ago. Tiana tried to sound gentle. "But Ethan, your mom, she's okay now, right?" He didn't answer. Just kissed her forehead, soft and distracted. "I'll be back soon, baby." And then he was gone. Hours passed. The digital clock on the nightstand blinked 2:37 a.m. Tiana lay awake, staring at the empty space beside her, her wedding ring catching the faint moonlight. Down the hallway, laughter echoed, faint but real. Her stomach sank. The next morning, she found them in the kitchen, Margaret, flawless in a pearl robe, sitting at the marble island while Ethan poured her tea. They looked like a painting. "Good morning, sweetheart," Margaret said with that soft, polished smile that never reached her eyes. "Morning," Tiana replied, trying to sound casual. "Did you sleep well?" Margaret sighed dramatically, setting her teacup down. "Barely. The nightmares came again. I saw him in my room." Her voice quivered just enough to sound convincing. Ethan immediately turned to her, voice filled with concern. "Mom, I told you, he can't hurt you anymore." Margaret placed a trembling hand on his. "I know, darling. But when you're alone in a big house like this, sometimes the past doesn't stay buried." Her eyes briefly flicked toward Tiana, cold, unreadable. That night, when Tiana reached for Ethan's hand, he pulled away. "Mom asked me to stay with her," he said quietly. "Just for tonight." Her voice cracked. "Ethan, that's what you said last night. And the night before." "I know, babe, she's scared. I can't leave her like that." "Then what about me?" she said, voice breaking. "What about your wife?" He looked torn, guilt painting his face. "It's just temporary. You know how much she's been through." Tiana swallowed hard. "No, Ethan. I know how much you went through watching it. But this isn't about trauma anymore." He didn't reply. He just looked at her like a man split in half. The son who couldn't abandon his mother, and the husband slowly abandoning his wife. That night, she heard voices again through the walls. Laughter. Then silence. Then a woman's low whisper. Tiana closed her eyes. A tear slid down her cheek. The mansion, her dream home, suddenly felt like a gilded cage. And somewhere down the hall, Margaret Sterling smiled into the dark. Morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows, painting the marble floors in gold. The mansion looked alive, but it was a kind of beauty that hid decay underneath. Tiana sat alone at the breakfast table, a fork untouched on her plate. She hadn't seen Ethan come to bed at all last night. Again, footsteps clicked across the floor. Margaret Sterling entered, graceful as ever, her silk robe brushing the tiles like a whisper. Her platinum hair was perfectly set, her diamond earrings flashing light. You'd never guess she'd been crying last night, if she even had. "Oh, good morning, dear," Margaret said, pouring herself coffee. "You're up early. Couldn't you sleep?" Tiana forced a smile. "Yeah, couldn't." "Ah." Margaret's lips curved slightly. "You'll get used to it. The nights here can be lonely." Tiana looked up, meeting her eyes. "I wasn't lonely until Ethan started leaving our room." Margaret stirred her coffee slowly, the silver spoon clinking against the cup. "Poor Ethan. He's such a sensitive soul. He worries about me, you know." "I know," Tiana said softly. "But he's my husband now." "Yes," Margaret replied, her voice sharp beneath the calm. "But he's still my son." The words hung in the air, heavy as stone. That evening, when Ethan finally returned to their room, his eyes were tired, his voice apologetic. "I'm sorry, Tiana. Mom had another breakdown." She was shaking, crying. She said she saw Dad standing over her again. Tiana sat at the edge of the bed, silent. Then, carefully, she asked, "Ethan, are you sure she's really seeing him?" He looked at her, confused. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe it's not the past haunting her. Maybe she's using it." He frowned. "Tiana, that's not fair." She rose from the bed, her voice trembling. "What's not fair is our marriage turning into a waiting room for your mother's pain." "Don't talk about her like that," he snapped, louder than he meant to. The room went quiet. Tiana blinked hard, fighting the sting in her eyes. "You used to fight for us, Ethan. What happened to that man?" He ran a hand over his face, his voice low. "You don't understand what she's been through." "Maybe not," she whispered, "but I know what I'm going through now." He turned away, guilt painted across his shoulders. "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight." And just like that, the distance between them became a wall neither of them knew how to climb. The next day, Tiana decided to explore. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe her mind was filling in shadows where there were none. But as she walked past the east wing, the part of the mansion Margaret never liked people entering, she noticed something strange. A door, slightly open. Inside, the air smelled of old perfume and paper. The room was dim, filled with dusty books, framed photos, and boxes labeled Ethan, age 5 Ethan, first day of school, Ethan's graduation. Tiana's breath caught. There were no pictures of Margaret's husband. Not one. But there were hundreds of Ethan. One photo sat on a silver frame at the center of the desk. A picture of Ethan as a boy, smiling, holding a red balloon. Underneath, in neat handwriting, was written, "The only man who ever truly loved me." The sound of a soft click made her spin around. Margaret stood in the doorway. "I see you found my memories," she said, her voice calm, too calm. Tiana froze. I was just curious." Margaret stepped closer, her heels clicking softly. "Curiosity can be dangerous in this house." Tiana swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to intrude." "Oh, but you did." Margaret's eyes glimmered, her tone turning almost tender. "You see, my dear, Ethan doesn't understand how much I sacrificed for him. How much I lost to keep him safe. You think you can just walk in and take what's mine?" Tiana's heart pounded. "He's not yours to keep, Mrs. Sterling. He's a grown man." Margaret smiled, slow, eerie, controlled. "Every man is still a boy to his mother. Especially one whose mother killed for him." That night, Tiana waited in the bedroom, lights off, staring at the door. When Ethan came in, she didn't speak at first. Then she said quietly, "Ethan, if we don't leave this house soon, your mother will destroy us." He blinked, startled. "What are you talking about?" "She's not healing, Ethan. She's feeding on you." He laughed, not cruelly, but out of disbelief. "That's insane." Tiana's voice cracked. "Is it? Because every night she cries, and every night you leave me to hold her hand. And every morning, you wake up farther away from me. How long before you forget I even exist?" He turned toward the window, silent. Outside, lightning cracked across the sky, followed by thunder that made the whole mansion tremble. Margaret watched from the hallway, a faint smile playing on her lips. Her plan was working. The storm didn't stop that night. It rolled over the Sterling mansion like something alive, growling, restless, heavy with warning. Tiana couldn't sleep. The rain tapped against the windows like fingers trying to get in. She sat up, wrapping her robe tighter around her body, staring at the door that led down the hall. That door he always walked through. Every night. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry again, but her throat was tight, her chest heavy. She loved Ethan. God, she did. But love couldn't breathe in a house like this. Finally, she whispered to herself, enough. The next morning, she cooked breakfast. The smell of pancakes and cinnamon filled the kitchen. For once, she wanted to start the day like a wife, not a ghost haunting her own marriage. Ethan walked in, looking exhausted, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes red. "Morning," she said softly, sliding a plate toward him. He smiled weakly. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." She looked at him for a long moment. "I miss you, Ethan." His fork froze halfway. "I'm still here." "Are you?" Her voice was quiet but steady. "Because every night, you leave me for her. You talk about her pain, her dreams, her fears. But what about mine?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Tiana, it's not that simple." "It never is with her, is it?" she said, her voice trembling. "She's like gravity. You don't even realize you're falling back into her." Before he could answer, Margaret walked in perfect timing, as always. "Well, isn't this cozy?" she said with that polished smile. "Smells lovely, Tiana." Tiana's jaw tightened. "Thank you. I made enough for everyone." Margaret smiled sweetly. "Oh, darling, I never eat pancakes. Too heavy. Ethan knows that." And just like that, Ethan pushed his plate away. Tiana looked at him, disbelief flashing in her eyes. "You haven't even tasted it." "I'm not really hungry," he murmured. The silence that followed was louder than thunder. Later that day, Tiana went for a walk through the garden, or what used to be a garden. The flowers were dying, their stems brittle from neglect. It was strange. For a mansion this beautiful, there was so much emptiness. Then she heard voices from the open window above. Ethan's and his mother's. Margaret's tone was soft, almost whispering. "She doesn't understand you, Ethan. She doesn't know what we've been through." "I love her, Mom," Ethan said, his voice faint but firm. "Love fades," Margaret replied. "Family doesn't." Tiana's breath caught. Her fingers curled into fists. That evening, she waited. When Ethan left the room again, as he always did, she followed. Barefoot, silent, heart-pounding. Down the hallway, past the portraits in glass cases, to the door of Margaret's bedroom. It was slightly open. Inside, Margaret sat on the bed, her hand in Ethan's hair like he was still a little boy. Her voice was low, calm, dangerous. "You know why I can't sleep without you close," she said. "You remind me of everything good that's left in this world." "Mom," Ethan said, sounding small. "You don't need me here every night." Margaret's eyes glistened. "Don't say that. You're all I have." Tiana stepped into the doorway. "That's a lie." They both froze. "Tiana," Ethan started, but she cut him off. "No, let's stop pretending," she said, her voice shaking but strong. "You had a husband, Margaret. You had a life. You survived him. But now you're using that same pain to chain your son to your side." Margaret rose slowly, her expression tightening. "Be careful what you accuse me of." "I'm not accusing," Tiana said. "I'm telling you what I see." Ethan stood between them, confused, panicked. "Both of you stop." But neither woman moved. Margaret's voice dropped, cold and smooth. "You think I'd hurt my own son?" Tiana took a step closer. "No, but you're killing our marriage. And you know it." Margaret's eyes darkened. "That marriage wouldn't exist if it weren't for me keeping this family name alive." Tiana's lips trembled, but she didn't back down. "Then maybe it's time to stop living for a name and start letting your son live his life." For a long moment, no one spoke. The air between them pulsed with something raw and dangerous. Then Margaret smiled, soft and slow, like a curtain closing over a secret. "You'll regret crossing me, dear." That night, Ethan didn't come back. Tiana sat on the edge of the bed until dawn, staring at the empty doorway. The storm had passed, but the house felt even colder. In the hallway, faint laughter drifted from down the hall, a sound that no longer felt human. And for the first time, Tiana realized something that made her skin crawl. Maybe this wasn't just about control. Maybe Margaret didn't want to keep Ethan. Maybe she wanted to own him. The next few days passed in silence. No laughter, no fights, no apologies, just silence that filled the mansion like fog. Tiana barely saw Ethan. He ate breakfast with his mother, took calls in her office, even spent his evenings checking on her. Every time she tried to talk, there was a new excuse. So she stopped asking and started watching. One afternoon, when Margaret went out with her driver, Tiana slipped into her study. The air inside was cool and sharp, scented faintly of lavender and paper. She opened drawers. Files. Letters. Old photographs. Then, at the bottom of a locked chest, she found a thin brown folder marked confidential. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were police reports, yellowed, faded. The night of his death. But the details didn't match the story Margaret had always told. There was no record of self-defense. No evidence of struggle. Just a cold statement. Gunshot wound to the head. No signs of physical altercation. Next to it was a photo. Ethan as a child, standing in the doorway, eyes wide. He'd seen everything. Tiana's breath caught. It wasn't just that Margaret killed her husband. She made Ethan watch. A floorboard creaked behind her. She turned, and there was Margaret, standing in the doorway, calm as ever, a faint smile on her lips. "I was wondering when you'd find that," she said softly. Tiana froze, clutching the folder to her chest. "You lied to him." Margaret stepped closer, her heels silent on the rug. "I protected him." "You broke him," Tiana snapped, her voice shaking. "And now you're still breaking him, one night at a time." Margaret tilted her head, eyes glinting. You think he'd believe you? You think he'd choose you over me? I don't need him to choose, Tiana said quietly. I just need to leave. Margaret smiled, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. You won't get far. You've seen what happens to people who take him away from me. For a second, Tiana saw something flicker in those eyes, madness, old and deep, like a ghost that never left. That night, the rain came again. Tiana packed her bag. Her hands shook, but her mind was clear. She left her wedding ring on the nightstand, beside Ethan's untouched watch. She walked past their room, past the long hall, past the door that had stolen her husband night after night. But just as she reached the stairs, she heard a voice behind her. Tiana. It was Ethan. He stood barefoot in the dim light, looking lost, like a child who'd just woken from a nightmare. Where are you going? She swallowed hard. I'm leaving, Ethan. Why? His voice cracked. We can fix this. She shook her head. Not while she owns you. Not while you're still her prisoner. He took a step closer, tears in his eyes. You don't understand, she needs me. No, Tiana whispered. You need you. And for the first time, he looked at her, really looked, like something inside him was waking up. Then, from down the hall, came a sound. Margaret's voice, trembling, sharp. Ethan. Ethan, I can't breathe. He froze. His body moved before his mind could catch up. Instinct, guilt, habit. Tiana grabbed his hand. Don't go, she whispered. Please. Stay with me. He looked between the two voices, one calling him from the past, one begging him toward the future. Then his hand slipped from hers. He turned and ran down the hall. Tiana left. She didn't look back. The rain soaked her as she stepped outside, suitcase in hand, the night sky cracked with thunder. The mansion stood behind her like a ghost, tall, dark, alive with voices that would never be free. She got into her car, started the engine, and drove until the city lights swallowed the storm. In the rearview mirror, the house disappeared. But the memory didn't. Weeks later, she received a call. It was Ethan. His voice was thin, distant. She's gone, he said. Mom passed in her sleep. Tiana closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. I'm sorry, Ethan. I didn't know what was real anymore, he whispered. You were right. About everything. What are you going to do now? She asked softly. There was a long pause. Then he said, learn to live outside that house. Maybe start over. Her throat tightened. You should. Silence. Then he said, Tiana, I never stopped loving you. She took a deep breath, looking out at the horizon. Maybe love's not the problem, Ethan. Maybe it's where we tried to plant it. The line went quiet. She hung up, watching the morning sun rise over the city, warm, alive, free. For the first time in a long while, she felt air fill her lungs without pain. She wasn't anyone's wife. She wasn't anyone's prisoner. She was just Tiana. And that was enough.